My name is Thalia, and I am a princess of Greece. To the world, I have everything golden dresses, a palace of marble, servants who obey my every wish. But the truth, I have nothing. My life is a beautiful prison where I am seen but never heard, admired but never free. One evening, the great gates of the palace opened. My father, King Aegis, had returned from battle. His soldiers entered first, proud and victorious, their armor shining under the fading sun. But behind them came the prisoners' men captured in war, warriors now stripped of their weapons and their freedom. Among them, one man stood out. His dark hair was tangled, his face covered in dust, but his eyes burned with defiance. Even in chains, he looked like a man who would never bow. My father's voice thundered across the courtyard. These men belong to me now. They will serve or they will die. The warrior didn't flinch. He lifted his gaze, and for a single dangerous moment, his eyes met mine. I should have looked away, but I didn't. Night had fallen over the palace, wrapping the world in silence. The torches flickered softly, casting golden light across the marble halls. Unable to sleep, I walked alone through the royal gardens, a place of peace and a life that felt anything but. Then I saw him, the warrior from before, a prisoner, a slave. He was carrying water from the fountain, his strong arms moving with effortless grace. His tunic was torn, his skin marked by the day's labor, but there was no weakness in him. I should have turned away. I should not have watched, but I did. His movements slowed as if he could feel my presence. For a moment, he paused, adjusting the heavy clay jar on his shoulder. And then he looked up. Our eyes met again. No words, no gestures. Just a silence heavier than stone. Something unfamiliar stirred inside me. Curiosity, fascination, something else. Then footsteps echoed in the distance. A guard was approaching. I stepped back into the shadows, pressing myself against the cold marble column. My heart pounded. The next night, I found myself walking through the garden again. I told myself it was just to clear my mind, that I wasn't looking for him, but when I reached the fountain, my breath caught. He was there. The warrior, the slave, was kneeling by the water, rinsing his hands. His dark hair was damp from sweat, strands falling over his forehead. He hadn't seen me yet. For a moment, I hesitated. This was madness. I was a princess, and he was nothing. At least that was what I had been taught. But when he finally turned and our eyes met, I stepped forward before I could stop myself. What is your name? The words slipped from my lips before I could think. He straightened slowly, studying me. His eyes were cautious, but not afraid. Nikos, he said, his voice deep but controlled. And you? I hesitated. He should have known who I was. Everyone did. Thalia. A small smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. I know. I swallowed hard. I should leave. This was dangerous. Instead, I found myself asking, do you miss your home? His gaze flickered as if he hadn't expected the question. He exhaled slowly, his hands tightening into fists. Yes, a pause. That now this is my home. There was something in his voice, not acceptance, not defeat. Something else. I should have ended the conversation. I should have walked away, but I didn't. And that was the moment everything changed. I returned to the garden every night. I told myself it was just coincidence, that I wasn't seeking him out. But I was, and so was he. Nikos was always there, near the fountain, waiting. At first, our conversations were brief. A few words, a stolen glance. But soon, they grew longer, deeper. He told me about Sparta, about his past, about his mother, who taught him to fight, and his younger brother, whom he would never see again. In return, I told him of my own prison, the golden cage of royalty, the suffocating rules, the future that was already written for me. And though we were from different worlds, in those moments, We were the same. But secrets do not stay hidden for long. One evening, as I made my way to the garden, I felt eyes on me. I turned, my heart hammering. It was my mother, the queen. She stood in the corridor, watching me with a knowing look. I had been careless. Thalia, she said softly, stepping closer, you were walking a dangerous path. I stiffened. Did she know? Had she seen us? Her gaze darkened. A princess does not lower herself. She didn't say his name, but she didn't have to. This was a warning. That night, as I reached the garden, my hands trembled. Nikos noticed immediately. What is wrong? He asked. I hesitated. Then, in a whisper, I said, my mother suspects something. His jaw clenched. Then you must stay away. I should have listened, but I didn't. For the next few days, I tried to stay away. I forced myself to remain in my chambers, surrounded by silk and gold, drowning in my father's endless discussions of war and alliances. But my thoughts were elsewhere. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the way his lips curved slightly when he spoke, the way his hands, rough from battle, moved so gently in the water of the fountain. So on the fourth night, I went back one last time, but I was not alone. As I stepped into the garden, a shadow moved behind me. A rustle of fabric, a breath sharp and quick, then a voice. Princess Thalia? I turned sharply. My blood ran cold. It was one of my father's servants, a woman named Diona. Her eyes flickered between me and Nikos, wide with realization. She had seen us. Panic tightened my chest. If she spoke, if she told my father... Diona, please, I whispered, stepping toward her. You must say nothing. Her expression hardened. I serve the king. She turned, ready to run. Nikos moved first. In one swift motion, he grabbed her wrist. She gasped. Let me go. I felt the world spinning around me. What had I done? I grabbed Nikos's arm, pulling him back. No, don't. For a moment, we all stood frozen in place. Then Diona's voice rang through the night. Guards! Footsteps pounded against the stone. Torches flared in the darkness. I looked at Nikos, my heart shattering. Run, I begged. Run, but it was too late. The guards arrived in seconds. Too fast. Two men seized Nikos, pulling him away from me. He did not fight. He did not struggle. His dark eyes met mine calm, steady. But I was not calm. No. I lunged forward, but strong hands grabbed my arms, holding me back. Thalia. My mother's voice sliced through the chaos. She stood near the palace steps, her expression unreadable. And beside her, my father. King Aegis stepped forward, his face a mask of fury. His eyes burned into Nikos, then shifted to me. A princess, he spat, lowering herself for a slave. Nikos did not flinch. He stood tall, proud, even as the guards forced him to his knees. Father, please, I begged. He is not enough. His voice was final, cold. I turned to Nikos, my heart in my throat. Say something. He held my gaze, his lips parting. But before he could speak, my father raised his hand. Take him away. The last thing I saw was Nikos being dragged into the darkness. Gone. And just like that, my world shattered. If you've watched this far, leave a like and subscribe to follow more.